My name is Mark, I'm 31, and my wife thinks I'm a fool. She has no idea that right now, as she sleeps soundly, 2 letters are making their way through the postal system. One is addressed to her, and will be delivered when she is at work. It contains every piece of evidence I've painstakingly gathered, proof that will shatter her world into a million pieces. The other? That one's for the wife of her secret lover. By tomorrow, their perfect lives will be reduced to rubble, and they won't even see it coming. But how did I, the fool, get here? And what exactly did my wife do to deserve this? If you've ever felt the sting of betrayal, stick around, because what I'm about to reveal will shock you to your core. And if you want to make sure you don't miss a single moment of this story, please hit that subscribe button to help me reach my first 100 subscribers, because I'm just starting out with this channel. It would mean the world. I was 31, married for 6 blissful years, with 2 incredible kids, a 3-year-old tornado named Leo and a sweet 5-year-old chatterbox, Mia. Our life, on the surface, was a picture postcard. I loved my family more than anything. Then, the cracks started to show. Small things at first. Things I initially dismissed as just kids being kids. One Tuesday morning, Mia bounced into the kitchen, her eyes wide with excitement. "Daddy! Grandma and Grandpa let us eat ice cream for breakfast at their house." Leo, still rubbing sleep from his eyes, chimed in. "Yeah! Mommy took us there yesterday." I chuckled, pouring their cereal. "Ice cream for breakfast? Sounds like a party." My wife, Jessica, was still asleep, so I just made a mental note to tease her about spoiling the kids. It wasn't strange at first. Grandparents spoiling kids is normal, right? But then, it happened again that same week. On Thursday, Mia, pointing at a drawing, said, "This is the tree at Grandma's house. Mommy took us there when you were at work." And on Saturday, Leo, mid-play, casually mentioned, "Grandpa showed me how to feed the birds when Mommy was visiting him." 3 times in 1 week. 3 distinct mentions of them being at Jessica's parents' house, 2 hours away. And Jessica hadn't breathed a single word about any of these trips. Not a "hey, I took the kids to my parents today," not even a "we had a quick visit." Nothing. This wasn't normal. My initial dismissal gave way to a prickle of unease. I wanted so desperately to believe it was just childish ramblings, misremembered details. Jessica had a part-time job, but these trips supposedly happened on days she was essentially free, with no prior plans mentioned to me. Was she trying to surprise me? Was it just an innocent oversight? A knot began to form in my stomach. I trusted Jessica completely, or at least I thought I did. But this felt off. It wasn't a sudden break in trust, more like a tiny, almost imperceptible crack appearing in the perfect facade of our life. Why wouldn't she tell me? What reason could there possibly be to keep this from me? The questions started, quiet at first, then growing louder, echoing in my mind. A fleeting thought pricked at me, just call Jessica's mom. A quick, casual "hey, have the kids been over lately?" But the idea immediately recoiled. It felt wrong. Invasive. Like I was already accusing Jessica, already tearing at the fabric of our trust based on what could still be just childish ramblings. What if it was nothing? What if I called and embarrassed myself, exposed my creeping suspicion to her parents, putting them in an awkward position? That phone call, I realized, wouldn't just be a simple question. It would be the first stone thrown, a potential opening strike in a war I desperately hoped wasn't even real. The questions kept simmering in my mind for days, a quiet but persistent hum beneath the surface of my normal routine. Why hadn't she mentioned the trips to her parents? 3 times in a week? I tried to push them away, to rationalize them, but the unease had grown too strong to ignore. I needed answers, not just for myself, but for the picture-perfect life I believed we shared. One evening, after the kids were finally asleep and the house settled into its familiar quiet, I found Jessica in the living room, scrolling through her phone. This was it. The moment of truth. My heart hammered against my ribs, a nervous rhythm I couldn't control. I walked over, trying to keep my voice casual, light, as if this was nothing more than a curious observation. "Hey, honey," I started, leaning against the doorframe. "The kids were talking about spending time at your parents' house this week. Mia said something about ice cream for breakfast, and Leo mentioned feeding birds with your dad. Sounds like they had a blast. You never mentioned taking them over there, though." Her head snapped up, and the casual scroll stopped dead. Her eyes, usually so warm and open, darted from my face to the floor, then back to my eyes, but never quite meeting them. A tiny, almost imperceptible tremor ran through her hand as she lowered her phone. "Oh," she said, and the single syllable was laced with a strange, brittle quality. Her smile, which usually melted my worries, felt forced, stretched thin. "They're just making things up, Mark. You know how kids are. Their imaginations run wild. They probably dreamed it, or heard a story somewhere." The words hung in the air, a flimsy curtain attempting to hide something much larger. Her eyes darted, her voice wavered. In that moment I knew. It wasn't disbelief that hit me first, it was a cold, hard certainty. The woman I married, the mother of my children, was lying to my face. A profound sense of disorientation washed over me. It was like watching a familiar landscape suddenly shift and warp before my eyes. My stomach dropped, a hollow ache blossoming in my chest. I forced myself to maintain eye contact, to push for something, anything, that felt like truth. 3 times, Jessica? In 1 week? They were pretty specific about it. And they mentioned being there when I was at work. Her forced smile tightened, a defensive wall slamming into place. "Mark, honestly, it's just childish ramblings. You're overthinking this. Don't you trust me?" The question, so casually thrown, felt like a slap. Trust? That was the very thing fracturing in real time. I ended the conversation, retreating with a mumbled excuse about needing to check on something in the garage. But my mind was no longer calm. It was a chaotic storm of confusion, hurt, and a growing, dangerous suspicion. My intuition, a voice I rarely ignored, was screaming that something was fundamentally wrong. The idea of calling her parents flitted through my mind again, but I dismissed it. I didn't want to make an awkward call and potentially tip anyone off. What if I was wrong? I'd look like the crazy, paranoid husband. The next morning, as Jessica prepared to leave for her part-time job, a desperate, almost primal urge took over. Then, an idea, cold and clinical, solidified in my mind. I walked straight to her car keys, snatched the spare set, and headed for the garage. It felt wrong, invasive, a violation of the trust she had just questioned. But her lie, that dismissive, casual lie, had already shattered something precious between us. I reached for the odometer. The number stared back at me, stark and unforgiving. I jotted down the current mileage, my hand steady despite the tremor in my soul. I would check it again when she returned. It was a long shot, I told myself, a desperate measure. I wanted to be wrong. I wanted her to be right, to laugh at myself for being so paranoid. But she wasn't. 5 days later, the moment she pulled back into the driveway, I was there. Casual, but my heart pounding like a drum solo. As she walked inside, I slipped out to the car. My gaze fixed on the odometer. My breath hitched. The numbers had jumped. Far more than a typical commute or a few errands. My calculations were swift, brutal. Over 500 extra miles in 5 days. That wasn't a mistake. That wasn't a commute. That wasn't an innocent trip to the grocery store. That was proof. In that instant, the last vestiges of doubt, of hope, of the life I thought I had, vanished. My world, as I knew it, just imploded. The foundation crumbled beneath my feet, leaving me standing in the rubble of a devastating truth. I knew, with a horrifying clarity, that some serious shit was going on. And I was going to find out exactly what. The mileage on Jessica's car had shattered my world, but what I discovered next didn't just shatter it, it pulverized it, piece by agonizing piece. The proof, from the odometer, was just the key, unlocking a door to a horror I hadn't even conceived. It happened a few days later, on a quiet Tuesday evening. Jessica had left her iPhone on the kitchen counter, screen up, unlocked. A notification had popped up, and out of some morbid, irresistible curiosity, or perhaps a desperate, foolish hope to find nothing, I glanced at it. It was from her college BFF, a woman I'd always found charming, if a little gossipy. But what caught my eye wasn't the sender, it was the app itself. Her Notes app was open, displaying a shared page. My brow furrowed. The Notes app? As a chat? That alone was bizarre. Jessica was meticulous about her privacy, almost to a fault. Why use something so clunky, so unconventional for a casual chat? Unless it was because it was less traceable, less obvious than a regular messaging app. My heart began to pound with a sickening drumbeat, a frantic rhythm against my ribs. I picked up the phone. My hands trembled, but I forced myself to be steady. And then I started to read. It wasn't a casual chat. It was a diary, a chronicle of a secret life, laid bare in stark, digital print. My eyes scanned lines, then paragraphs, and with each word, the air grew colder, thinner, harder to breathe. It was all there, the coded language for meetups, the sly references to lunch dates, that clearly weren't just about food, the casual mentions of escape. Then, the name appeared. Bobby. My vision blurred, the words swimming before my eyes, but I forced them back into focus. Bobby. An ex-boyfriend from high school, I vaguely recalled. A ghost from her past I never considered a threat. But here he was, terrifyingly alive in these clandestine messages. They weren't just discussing their sordid affair, they were dissecting it, relishing in it. Jessica, my wife, was detailing her escapades, her feelings, her lies to her best friend. It was a level of betrayal I hadn't thought possible. It wasn't just physical infidelity, it was an emotional one, a complete disregard for our vows, our family, my very existence. But the real gut punch, the moment that turned my heartbreak into a cold, seething rage, was when I read about Bobby's wife. Jessica had written, Bobby's wife, OMG. Saw her at the grocery store. She's gotten so fat after kids. Like, seriously, what even happened to her? Good thing Bobby has me, lol. My stomach lurched, a wave of pure nausea washing over me. Good thing Bobby has me, lol. Laughter. Cruel, dismissive, utterly devoid of empathy. It wasn't just betrayal, it was malice. My wife, the mother of my children, was not only actively destroying my family, she was laughing at another woman's pain, mocking her for the very changes that childbirth brings. She was reveling in someone else's misfortune while creating her own web of deceit. The thought solidified in my mind, cold and hard. This wasn't just about us anymore. This was about a pattern of callous disregard, about a venomous streak I never knew existed within the woman I loved. It dehumanized her completely in my eyes, stripping away any shred of the Jessica I thought I knew. It wasn't just a transgression, it was a character flaw, an ugliness that made my skin crawl. Tears, hot and bitter, pricked my eyes. My hands, still trembling, instinctively reached for my own phone. I knew I needed proof, undeniable evidence of this gut-wrenching discovery. With a methodical, almost detached precision, I snapped photo after photo of the notes page, ensuring every damning word, every cruel laugh, was captured. I emailed them to myself, then to my work computer, a secure place no one else could access. After that, I connected my phone to my printer and printed them all out. Crisp, white sheets of paper, each one a testament to her deception and depravity. I folded them carefully, a sick, heavy weight in my hands, and stashed them away. Deep in the back of my darkest, most private drawer, they lay waiting. A hidden weapon, a silent promise. My wife thought I was a fool, blindly unaware. But in that moment, staring at the digital confession of her cruelty, a new resolve hardened within me. The game had changed. This wasn't just about ending a marriage. It was about exposing a truth that deserved to be seen. The printouts from Jessica's notes app, those chilling fragments of her double life, became my constant, burning torment. They confirmed my worst fears, yet left me hungry for the full, brutal truth. My wife was having an affair, but with whom, and how deep did this rabbit hole go? I needed answers, not just whispers and snatched screenshots. I needed undeniable, documented proof. My first thought was a friend from college, Dave, who joined the police force. I called him, my voice strained, attempting to sound casual. I danced around the edges of my predicament, hinting at marital issues and suspicions, carefully omitting the gory details of my recent discoveries. Dave, bless him, picked up on my distress immediately. He didn't pry, but instead suggested someone. Look, Mark, he said, his voice lowering. I know a guy. Russ. Used to be one of the best detectives on the force, then went private. Discreet, thorough, and he knows how to find what people don't want found. The next day, I was sitting across from Russ in his nondescript office, the blinds drawn, the air thick with unspoken secrets. He was a man of few words, his gaze sharp and assessing. I laid out the printed screenshots, my hands flat on the table to stop them from shaking. I recounted the mileage discrepancy, the kids' innocent comments, Jessica's evasive lies. I felt a profound shame admitting all of it, but the need for definitive answers outweighed my embarrassment. Russ listened, nodding occasionally, his expression unreadable. I handed him a hefty retainer, a sum I could barely afford but felt utterly necessary. Find him, I said, my voice barely a whisper. Find out everything. The wait was agonizing. Each day stretched into an eternity. Every phone call made me jump. I found myself watching Jessica with new, disgusted eyes, seeing a stranger in the woman who shared my bed. The love was curdling into resentment, replaced by a cold, desperate need for validation of my pain. Then, a week later, the email arrived. The subject line was simply, "Report, Mark." My heart seized in my chest. This was it. I opened the attachment, and the screen filled with the unvarnished truth, colder and harder than I could have ever imagined. Each page was a new blow, delivered with clinical precision. Russ's report detailed with chilling accuracy every sordid detail of Jessica's betrayal. Each photo, each timestamp, was a stab to the gut. There were grainy, zoomed-in images of her car, pulling up to a prearranged spot. Then the man, his back to the camera, but clearly him, getting into her passenger seat. Lunch. Casual, public, yet hiding a secret. Then, the real horror, a series of photos of them entering a cheap, dumpy motel on the outskirts of town. The kind of place with flickering neon signs and stained curtains. Not a romantic hideaway, but a place for quick, dirty encounters. My wife. The woman I loved, the mother of my children, reduced to grainy images sneaking into a motel with another man. The timestamps were merciless. 1:17 p.m. entering, 3:42 p.m. exiting. Hours. Hours of my life, of our family time, traded for this squalid, secret world. The reality was even uglier than my worst nightmares. The report also detailed her routine, dropping the kids off at her parents' house, then driving straight to meet Bobby. After their clandestine meetings, she'd pick up the kids, her face composed, ready to return to our perfectly curated home as if nothing had happened. It was a perfectly executed deception, a ballet of lies. And I, the fool, had been dancing to her tune. The PI report lay spread across my desk, a grim tapestry woven with deceit and betrayal. It was everything I needed for a divorce, proof beyond a shadow of a doubt. But the thought of simply ending the marriage, of walking away clean, felt hollow. It felt like losing. And more than that, it felt like repeating history. I closed my eyes, and suddenly, I wasn't 31, a betrayed husband. I was 8 years old again, huddled outside my parents' bedroom door, listening to the muffled shouts, the venomous whispers. "Whore!" My dad had screamed, his voice thick with rage. "Adulterer!" My mom had shrieked back, her words laced with bitter tears. Their cheating, their screaming matches, the endless acrimony, had been the soundtrack to my childhood. I remembered the shattered dishes, the slamming doors, the way my siblings and I tiptoed around the house, terrified of igniting another explosion. Their war had torn our family apart, leaving deep, jagged scars on all of us. I swore then and there, a scared little boy silently making a desperate vow, that my kids would never experience that kind of chaos. They would never witness the ugliness of betrayal, the corrosive fallout of a broken home. Now, here I was, standing on the edge of my own domestic implosion. Jessica's actions threatened to throw my children into that same abyss, to repeat the cycle of pain I had so vehemently sworn to break. The thought was unbearable. It was in that moment, as the phantom echoes of my parents' fights rang in my ears, that something shifted within me. The raw anguish began to solidify into something colder, harder. A desperate need to protect my children, combined with the searing pain of my own betrayal, ignited a dark spark. The man my wife was cheating with, his full name was Robert Bobby Jenkins. He was married, with 3 kids of his own. 3 innocent children, just like mine, whose lives were about to be irrevocably impacted by their father's reckless choices. The report also detailed that he worked as an operations manager for his father-in-law's business. That last detail, in particular, made a chilling idea bloom fully formed in my mind. And I was ready to play. I opened my eyes, a new, unsettling clarity settling over me. This wasn't about revenge on Bobby, not for my own sake. My anger, truly, was directed solely at Jessica. But seeing the clinical details of their affair, the casual way they met in some dingy motel, I couldn't shake the image of his wife. The same way Jessica had scoffed at Bobby's wife getting fat after kids, another woman out there was being blindsided, her life desecrated by a partner she trusted. I felt a strange, almost detached sense of responsibility towards her. She deserved to know. She deserved the truth, just as I had eventually found mine. The pieces were all in place. My divorce lawyer, a no-nonsense woman named Brenda who specialized in untangling messy marital knots, had finalized the petition. The documents were ready, meticulously detailing the grounds for dissolution. And Russ had the address of Bobby's wife, along with the neatly compiled dossier of her husband's infidelity. The day had come. I chose a Wednesday. Jessica's busiest day at her part-time job, when she was most visible, most in control of her carefully curated facade. I wanted this to hit her where it hurt, in the very environment where she projected an image of perfect normalcy. I'd arranged for the process server to meet me near her workplace, a busy retail store in the mall. I wasn't going to be there for the actual serving, no need to invite a public scene or give her a direct target for her anger, but I wanted to know the exact moment it happened. My phone vibrated in my pocket. A brief, coded text from the server. Delivered. A surge of something cold and powerful ran through me. Not triumph, not exactly. More like a grim satisfaction. I pictured the scene, Jessica, likely bustling through her day, perhaps laughing with colleagues, completely oblivious. Then, the crisp rustle of papers, an unfamiliar hand extending a manila envelope. The sudden, public unveiling of her secret life. The color draining from her face, her eyes wide with shock as she read the words petition for dissolution of marriage and realized I knew everything. It was a fleeting moment of grim satisfaction, the first undeniable crack in her carefully constructed lie, shattered for all to see. I knew the begging, the anger, the tears would come later, when she arrived home. But for that precious, silent moment, in the middle of her workday, her carefully built world would come crashing down. While that scene was unfolding across town, another, equally pivotal, interaction was taking place. I had instructed Russ to meet with Bobby's wife. I didn't need a detailed report of that encounter. I didn't want to know the specifics of her breakdown, her anger or her grief. That wasn't my business. My purpose was singular, to arm her with the truth. I imagined the scene. Russ, professional and stoic, presenting the meticulously gathered evidence, the photos, the timestamps, the motel receipts. The same cold, hard facts that had gutted me. I imagined the shock on her face when Russ laid out the undeniable truth. She deserved to know. She deserved to have the power of information, to decide her own fate rather than be kept in the dark by a deceitful husband. Her marriage, her family, her future, they were hers to reclaim or dismantle, now that the lie was exposed. My anger with Bobby wasn't personal, not in the way it was with Jessica. He was merely an accomplice, a willing participant in the destruction of my family. But his wife, like me, was a victim of his deception. My act was not one of revenge against him, but of revelation to her. What she chose to do with that information was entirely up to her. I had simply lit the fuse to whatever consequences Bobby might later face. The dominoes were now falling, and their reverberations would soon be felt far beyond my own shattered home. On the surface, the divorce with Jessica was proceeding with an almost unsettling calm. No screaming matches, no public outbursts, no drawn-out court battles over petty grievances. For the sake of our children, I ensured the process was as smooth as possible, at least externally. I wasn't going to subject Leo and Mia to the same battlefield my own childhood had been. I remembered the screaming, my father calling my mother a whore, and worse, her retaliating with equal venom. That toxic chaos had scarred me, and I was fiercely determined to break that cycle of trauma for my kids. Their well-being was my absolute priority, a silent mantra that guided every decision. But beneath that veneer of calm, a different kind of war was being waged. While I wasn't actively seeking to cause her financial ruin or public disgrace beyond what her actions already invited, I certainly wasn't making it easy for her. My anger, though controlled, was a sharp, persistent blade, and I found subtle, calculated ways to make her truly feel the weight of her betrayal. A few weeks into the divorce proceedings, Jessica, perhaps desperate to salvage some semblance of her former life, suggested couples therapy. "Mark," she pleaded, her voice thick with unshed tears. "Please, just one session. For the kids. Maybe we can talk through this." I agreed. Not because I harbored even a sliver of hope for reconciliation, not because I believed there was a path to forgiveness or a future for us. My marriage was irrevocably broken. No, I agreed because it presented a unique opportunity. It felt good to lay out exactly how I felt about what she'd done. It was a controlled environment, a sanctioned space where I could finally articulate the depth of my pain, my disgust, my disappointment, and my absolute fury, without the fear of escalating into the kind of toxic screaming matches my parents had specialized in. In those sessions, I wasn't there to reconcile. I was there to deliver every painful truth, every ounce of my disgust, straight to her face. The therapist, a well-meaning woman, tried to mediate, to encourage. Shared feelings. But I wasn't interested in sharing. I was interested in delivering. I spoke calmly, methodically, detailing the cold facts of the PI report, the callous words from her notes app, the betrayal of our children's innocence. I watched her face crumble, her composure shatter. She would start strong, attempting to defend, to deny, to deflect, but by the end of each session, she was reduced to a sobbing mess. Watching her break down, week after week, was the only therapy I needed. She always left those appointments in tears, often sitting bawling in her car for a while before she could pull herself together and drive away. Eventually, even Jessica, blinded by her self-deception for so long, had to face the inevitable. She realized the marriage was already over, that there was no path back. After just a few sessions, she canceled the remaining appointments. The subtle revenge, the psychological unraveling, had served its purpose. I never told Leo or Mia the ugly details of what happened between their mother and me, and I probably never will. I don't know what Jessica has told them about it, but I still have Russ's comprehensive report, those damning photos and meticulous timestamps, stashed away. A hidden truth, a secret insurance policy, just in case they ever need to see the unvarnished reality of what transpired. My primary goal was to shield them, and that, above all else, was a success. On the day of the divorce, my lawyer, Brenda, handled everything with quiet efficiency. Jessica sat across the courtroom, her face pale, her gaze fixed on the judge. The judge's voice was a monotonous drone, rattling off legal terms. When he finally pronounced the words, "Joint custody," a wave of relief washed over me. It was what I'd fought for, what my kids deserved. A stable, shared environment, free from the venomous battles that had poisoned my own childhood. My divorce, born from betrayal, concluded with a quiet, almost dignified peace. While my divorce quietly moved towards joint custody, a stark contrast was unfolding in Bobby's life. The fuse I had lit, the truth I had revealed to his wife, had detonated with cataclysmic force. I hadn't sought to ruin him directly, only to expose his deceit. But Bobby's own character, his own volatile nature, ensured his complete and utter self-destruction. His wife, a woman I'd never met but felt a strange kinship with, didn't hesitate. She didn't just ask for a divorce, she unleashed a storm of righteous fury. Before Bobby even knew what was happening, she had cleaned out their joint accounts, leaving him with nothing but empty promises and a stack of bills. The very next day, she took their 3 children and vanished, finding refuge with her own family. The true hammer blow came swiftly after. As soon as her father, Bobby's boss, the man who owned the very business Bobby managed, found out about his son-in-law's infidelity, there was no hesitation. Bobby was summarily fired, his career, built on trust and family ties, annihilated in an instant. But it didn't stop there. Since her parents actually owned the house where Bobby and his wife lived, the eviction notice was taped to their front door within days, a final, public nail in the coffin of his life. Their divorce was anything but smooth. It was ugly, visceral, a public spectacle that spilled from the courtroom into the streets. There were endless, vicious fights in court, loud and often violent confrontations outside of it. Bobby's true colors emerged, a volatile, angry man who lashed out when cornered. One particularly brutal incident saw him confront his estranged wife at the house, their argument escalating into a screaming match that drew the attention of her protective brother. When Bobby, fueled by rage and desperation, tried to physically threaten her, her brother stepped in. The next thing anyone knew, Bobby was on the ground, his nose clearly broken, blood staining the pavement. That wasn't the end. Restraining orders followed, swiftly issued and frequently violated. There were more incidents, more police reports, criminal charges for harassment and assault. Bobby, spiraling out of control, even spent some time in jail, a direct consequence of his inability to control his temper and accept the fallout of his actions. He was a man consumed by the chaos he himself had created. I heard snippets of it through Russ, a quiet observer of the aftermath. Bobby wasn't just losing his marriage, he was losing everything. His family, his job, his home, and ultimately, his freedom. My initial act had merely been to show his wife the truth. Bobby's own rage, his own desperate attempts to control the uncontrollable, had sealed his fate. He had ripped apart his own life, piece by agonizing piece. Years have passed since the dust settled on the wreckage of 2 marriages. My life, once consumed by betrayal and the pursuit of truth, has found a new equilibrium. Jessica and I, remarkably, managed to forge a functional co-parenting relationship. We got along well enough, driven by the shared goal of raising our children. But that was the extent of it. Our conversations are purely transactional, orbiting solely around Leo and Mia. There's no animosity, no lingering bitterness, but also no connection, no warmth, no shared history beyond the kids. She's a relic of a past I've moved beyond, a distant figure in the landscape of my present. I don't hate her, not anymore. My feelings for her are simply nothing. And my children? That, above all else, was my victory. Leo and Mia grew up in a stable home, split between 2 parents who, whatever their personal history, never subjected them to the venomous disputes that poisoned my own childhood. They never witnessed the screaming, the accusations, the raw, ugly pain that had defined my early years. They are well-adjusted, thriving adults now, and the quiet success of their upbringing is the greatest vindication of all. I never told them the full, sordid details of what happened, and I probably never will. The report, Russ's meticulous documentation, still sits in a locked box, a contingency I hope I never need to use. As for Bobby, the last I heard, he'd left the state entirely. His disappearance from the scene was the final, predictable act in a tragedy he wrote himself. He chose to destroy a family, and ultimately, destroyed his own. His wife, the woman I had Russ meet, did more than just survive, she thrived. She went to work at her father's company, and after he retired she took over, running it with a quiet strength that spoke volumes. She rebuilt her life, her family, and her career, rising from the ashes of Bobby's recklessness. I didn't hate Bobby. My anger, truly, was reserved for Jessica, for the intimate betrayal that tore my world apart. Bobby was merely a catalyst, a willing participant in a destructive act. But every man, every person, deserves to know the truth when their life is being undermined by deceit, and every truth, once revealed, has consequences. I just made sure the right people got the information they deserved. I simply lit the fuse. The explosion that followed, the utter demolition of Bobby's life, was entirely his own making, a direct result of his choices and the fury of those he wronged. And in the quiet aftermath, I found a strange, hard-won peace.